Welcome to War Games Untoast, all you wonderful people. I am once again back talking about the latest edition of Warcry, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Today we're looking at the latest FAQ for Warcry. So this released at the end of January, I think it was the 31st. And it does some pretty major things to change up Warcry, and that's what we're going to look at. But before we get started with all that nonsense, please remember to leave a like, a subscribe, and a comment. It helps the channel an awful lot, and it'd be awesome to see your feedback and what you want to see next. Someone actually requested this video, and that's why we're here. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. So let's see if I can get my rig to actually work here. So if we click the old button here, hey, there we go. So I should now be in this top little corner, and then we have the actual document here. So, looking at said document, basically this is a living document, so anything in magenta is new stuff. So things that have been added to the last time it was updated. And so we're not going to go through the whole thing, mainly because later down the line, as you can see, we start looking at different factions. Now, I may have a near encyclopedic knowledge of Warcry. It does not extend to every single faction, every single minor rule change. But I will be covering all the major changes and the things that I actually can talk about, that I know about. So the biggest change, one of the biggest changes is actually right here. It's the first thing here. Okay, so on page 68, there is a paragraph that used to say, I've got it on a different screen over here. So lastly, so it's the last paragraph, okay, of pick a weapon and target, okay? It used to say, lastly, missile attack actions cannot be made against enemy fighters that are within 1 inch of another fighter from the attacking fighter's warband. The risk of hitting your ally is simply too great. Now, what this means is, if you have a missile weapon, you can't shoot things if the thing you are shooting at is too close to an ally. Now, this does add some restrictions to shooting. Basically, you can't shoot into combat. That's the big thing there. You can't shoot into engagement range. This is now changed. So it's changed to this, and this is a buff to some weapons, not many, but some. So it changes to this. Lastly, a missile attack action cannot target an enemy fighter that is within 1 inch of another fighter from the attacking fighter's warband unless both of the following are true. The attack action has no minimum range, and the attacker is within 3 inches of that enemy fighter. So what does it actually change? Well, firstly, it lets you fire into combat in very specific circumstances. So firstly, your weapon must have no minimum range. So what weapons exist that have that characteristic? I can think of only one off the top of my head, and that would be the Flame Hurler for the Horns of a Shut. That just has a range of 6. It fulfills that section perfectly, you know? It has no minimum range, therefore you can have fun and blast away. Now, the second has to be true as well, and that is the attacker is within 3 inches of that enemy fighter. So this basically means your ranged weapon needs to not be at range. So a ranged weapon is characterized as any weapon that I believe has the ranged rune mark, or has a range that is greater than 3. So you basically have to be in melee range to fire into combat. And that makes sense. So providing you are within 3 inches, so within the 0 inch to 3 inch melee range bubble, and your weapon has no minimum range, so the Flame Hurler, you can then fire at a target. And that makes sense. And that's quite a buff to the Flame Hurler. One of the things with the Flame Hurler was that you just couldn't really... is that you just couldn't fire in combat. That's like a weakness of any range weapon, and the Flame Hurler was no exception. This actually is a buff to the Flame Hurler, although you still don't necessarily want to get it that close to combat. That could result in a dead Flame Hurler. And of course, this applies to any weapon that fills that bracket. That this kind of weapon type. I can't think of many, They do exist, however, and I suspect there's enough to make a difference in several factions. I would be very surprised if only the Horns of Ashut had this. So yeah, good buff, interesting change, good buff, makes sense. So we've got a bit here on raised fighters. Like with any game that has raising, resurrecting, summoning mechanics, it always causes issues in the rules. I believe this is the second or third time they've done this. This isn't new. This is new. It's Magenta, but this section has been here and rewritten, I believe, 2 or 3 times now, because summonable and resurrectable enemies, undead, demons, always cause issues 100% of the time. So yeah, I don't play those factions. I can't really say if this is any good. I assume it just clarifies some things and makes it so it makes more sense. There's less like loopholes or holes or gaps in the ruling. So we'll move on. This one's important though. This one's huge. So page 75, carrying treasure. So this used to read as essentially, I've got it here actually. Hold the phone. So it used to be, yeah, thought so. So how this rule used to work was, it was kind of weird. So the debuff, so when you have the treasure token, your model is debuffed to have less movement and they can't fly. Now this debuff, the movement debuff, only took effect in the old ruling on if you started your turn holding the relic, or started a move action holding the relic. And yeah, that was weird. That was a weird way of doing it. It basically meant if you had a lot of movement on a character that wasn't flying, even if they were flying, it didn't really matter. You couldn't fly, but the movement characteristic was all that mattered. So say if you had cavalry, movement 12 cavalry or whatever, movement 10 cavalry, you could move like an inch, pick up the treasure, and then move 11 more inches before that effect would take, before you'd be slowed down. And this helped everything. Even if you didn't move fast, even if you moved slowly or average, you could still eke out extra movement, and it made no sense. What this does is, it makes the rule make sense. Instead of activating when you were going to do a movement action, it activates the moment you pick up the treasure. And this makes way more sense narratively, mechanically it makes more sense. And yeah, no, this is a fantastic change. It stops various cheeses going on, you know. It also ends it'll end your movement as well. So if you move, say if you had a movement of 4, and you moved 3 inches to the relic, and then picked it up, you could not move anymore, because your movement is reduced to 3, and it would apply that debuff across your, retroactively apply that debuff across your movement, so you couldn't move any further. And so it can actually end your movement activation too in certain circumstances. So this change, it all for it, massive. I would say it's arguably a fairly substantial change, almost massive, and yeah, a healthy change for the game. And honestly, the amount of people who've gotten this rule prior to the change wrong is staggering. A lot of games I've played have people getting this wrong because they assume it works like this. They assume that, and it doesn't. It does now, but it didn't. So wonderful change. Well, Zip Zap Zoop passed the commentary. We'll go over here. So this is what I really want to talk about. This is the stuff that's really important. So you'll see here that monsters have had a huge change. Points costs have gone up. Now, I haven't checked every single points value and what they were and what they are now. However, these ones are very spicy. So I do know how expensive the Chimera was. This guy's went up by like 130 points. 100, wait, possibly more. Definitely over 100 points. So this guy went up by over 100 points. The Gorgon has went up by over 100 points. Thygo about 100 points. Like, These are huge. Death here as well. The order up here. There's destruction down here with their stuff. Okay. These are massive changes. So the issue, my personal gripe with Warcry is monsters. Monsters do not fit Warcry. In my opinion, I think they go beyond the scope of the game. And the implementation, whilst interesting and fun, was terrible. They were way too cheap. They took up a third of your army and then could kill 2/3 of your opponent's warband without much hassle. The Chimera in particular was considered to be one of the strongest things in all of Warcry, and that was because it was very cheap, it could fly, it could move fast, and it hit like a ton of bricks, and its abilities were ludicrous. Across the board, ludicrous. You just couldn't stop it. You could net it, who cares? If you netted it, it would still kill you, because it had such board presence and reach and scope that you would die anyway. So if you were to net this thing, it wouldn't help. Not in the way you would think it would. You'd have to have a lot of netters to keep this thing held down for the entire game. The Gorgon is brutally effective, disgustingly strong, massive damage, stupid number of wounds, and yet these points values are now reflective of what they should be. Instead of being a third of your army, they're now almost, if not more than, half of your army cost. And that change is unbelievably healthy for Warcry. Warcry is a skirmish game. It's a small-scale skirmish game, and monsters don't fit that. I don't think they fit the remit of Warcry at all. I don't think they should exist in Warcry. They do, and this change is a positive change to keep them out of Warcry. In competitive Warcry, which I do try to avoid, but it happens from time to time, Chimeras were everywhere. Chimeras are too good. If you didn't take a Chimera, you were a fool. Chimeras are too good. There's a reason you couldn't buy them from a Gamer's Workshop directly. There's a reason why they're really hard to get hold of. It's because all the competitive Warcry players are buying them. Because they are so gosh darn powerful. And they still are. They haven't nerfed any stats yet. All they've done is change points values, and these points values are for the better. These guys being this expensive is only good for the game. And this is the biggest change in Warcry. This will make the game better. I mean, the Zombie Dragon, 540 points. Crazy expensive. If you want to take it, have fun. But you are going to struggle to take much else. And yeah, this is all good. All good right here. I am all for that. There's some other little changes in this section. This is the compendium section. For example, this is a fairly big nerf. I would assume. I don't play this faction, but it looks substantial. It won't highlight for some reason. So change No Mercy for the Anvil Guard loyalists to be a quad from a triple. That looks to be a pretty substantial change. That's a huge nerf to an ability that I assume is quite good. Never encountered it as far as I'm aware. But yeah, going from a triple to a quad, you will not see that ability going off anywhere near as much now, which I assume is healthy. If it was weak, I don't see how they would nerf it. That's a huge nerf, so it must be pretty strong. Up here, the Pyrocaster, gaining the Fly rune mark. If you play as Disciples of Teach Demons, then getting Fly on anything is always a good idea. So this is a flat, straight up buff to the Pyrocaster. That's all I can say. Beyond that, there's just one more little sneaky thing, which is here. So, one of the strange issues with the soon to not be new, but currently still new, Hunters of Huanshi, the Jade Obelisk box, duo box, was that the Hunters of Huanshi were not Order, and the Jade Obelisk were not Chaos. So what this meant was you couldn't use allies. That was the biggest change. The biggest issue is that you couldn't actually bring allies to them because they weren't assigned to those. They didn't have the rune marks. They weren't part of any Grand Alliance. So that was a big blunder there. One that I actually missed whilst reviewing the faction, both factions, because I assumed they were that, and they are that. They've now been changed to be that, but they weren't for a while. Good change. And finally, this little tidbit right here for the Hunters of Warcry. Now, I love the Hunters of Warcry. I've just finished painting some Hunters of Warcry, and I may post a post somewhere with those things I've just painted. They are terrible, but I've painted them. And yeah, this is a bizarre ruling. So I think one of the interesting factors with Hunters of Warcry that there is a rules as written clause is that there's a rules as written interpretation where you can take less damage than you should. That's not how the rule. That's not how the rule works, and it's interesting that they haven't clarified that in any FAQ yet, from what I can see. But this is interesting here because this has cropped up from time to time. So, a fighter can make this reaction after they've been allocated damage points by a melee attack action. This fighter makes a bonus disengage action. So, the eagle-eyed amongst you may actually miss what has been changed here. And you may wonder as well why it has been changed at all. And it's this little bit here, bonus. So, in the original ruling on the card, which I have, there is no bonus. So what does this mean? It means that if someone was going to be a proper little rules lawyer, and, you know, fair to them, there could be, and they'd be within the right to, because it's how the rules are written, and rules as written is how the game should be played at all times. If you ever use this, you'd actually use an AP for the reaction, and then you'd also use a second AP to disengage, because it wasn't a bonus action, it was an actual action. So if you ever used Slippery prior to this, your opponent was well within their rights to tell you to take normal actions that turn, because you would have used both of them. Clearly, that is not how it was intended, and now it has been written to be as the intent, and now it is a bonus disengage action. Now, this has only come up in games once for me, but I've heard other people have it a couple of times. But also, I've heard very few people even complain about it. So I assume many people have not had this crop up in their games. And now it never will. So yeah, that is the FAQ. There's some more things here. I'll post a link in the description. Feel free to go through it yourself. You know, there's some actual designer commentaries to look through, updates here and there, you know. Things I may have missed, or that I just don't understand, because, spoiler, pretty stupid. So, but yeah, great FAQ. The big changes are huge, and they make the game run better. Buffs to ranged weapons, wonderful. Clarifying how treasure works, making that less stupid, wonderful. Making monsters fuck off, even better. Like, this is a great FAQ. Check it out, it's great. And hopefully we get to hopefully I get to get my hands on that new that new Blood Hunt box set, and that looks pretty cool. I was going to do a video on that, but it seemed a bit redundant. Plenty of other channels have already covered that, and they'll do a better job than me. But those models look pretty damn good. And you know, if Games Workshop's watching, hi, nice to meet you. Please send one my way. Thanks. In the meantime, however, have fun playing Warcry, and remember to leave a like, a comment, and a subscribe. And I will catch you all next time. You absolute legends. Ta-ra.